Hey everyone, welcome back to Deep Dive Doctrine, where we tackle tough topics at the intersection of faith, politics, and truth. Today we're diving into something that's been buzzing in headlines and church pews alike: how the MAGA movement uses Judeo-Christian values to justify harsh policies against undocumented immigrants. But here's the twist. From a theological standpoint, this rhetoric isn't just selective, it's often straight up unbiblical. We'll break it down step by step, backed by scripture and expert insights. If you're ready to challenge some assumptions, hit that like button and let's get started. This is about 10 minutes of eye-opening reflection. First off, let's understand what we're dealing with: the MAGA crowd. Think about Trump rallies. Christian nationalist events often invoke Judeo-Christian values to argue against undocumented immigration. They paint America as a Christian nation under the siege of outsiders who don't share our biblical heritage. For example, at a recent Christian nationalist revival, J.D. Vance echoed this, saying strict immigration stances are about keeping the faith and comparing the country to a home you protect from intruders. It's like build the wall to preserve our godly ways. If that were the case, though, you'd think consistency would matter, but Vance himself is married to Usha Vance, a non-Christian immigrant's daughter from a Hindu Telugu Indian family who practices Hinduism and credits her faith with shaping their stable home life. If the rhetoric demanded excluding those who don't fit a narrow Judeo-Christian mold to protect our values, he wouldn't be with her. Back in 2018, Attorney General Jeff Sessions quoted Romans 13 to defend the zero-tolerance policy that separated families at the border, claiming governments are instituted by God to enforce laws. And in broader MAGA circles, Judeo-Christian becomes a dog whistle. It unites conservatives while excluding Muslims, non-whites, or anyone seen as a cultural threat. Critics point out this term is a 20th century invention, more political than theological, designed to fight communism, not dictate borders. But in MAGA hands, it's weaponized to say undocumented immigrants are invading and replacing our values, with 81% of white Christian nationalists buying into that narrative. The irony: this rhetoric often ignores the Judeo part entirely, sidelining Jewish teachings on hospitality while cozying up to anti-Semitic fringes. It's not about faith, it's about fear and power. Okay, let's open the Bible and see what it teaches on this subject. Spoiler, the Bible is packed with commands to welcome the stranger. Over 100 references and verses across the Old and the New Testament. This isn't optional, it's really core to the Judeo-Christian ethics. Start with the Hebrew Bible, the Judeo foundation. Leviticus chapter 19 verses 33 to 34 reads, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God." Deuteronomy chapter 10 verse 19 echoes, "And you are to love those who are foreigners, for you yourselves were foreigners in Egypt." These aren't suggestions, they're divine mandates rooted in Israel's own history as migrants and refugees. Not to forget that white people themselves are migrants who invaded native lands, displacing indigenous people in America. They were foreigners, often welcomed or tolerated, yet now many in MAGA want to exclude others, ignoring their own history as strangers. God doesn't distinguish between legal and undocumented like we do today. The sojourner, or ger in Hebrew, often meant vulnerable outsiders without citizenship rights. Exodus chapter 22 verse 21 warns, "Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt." And in the prophets like Zechariah chapter 7 verses 10, God condemns those who oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. Now, looking at the New Testament in Matthew chapter 25, verses 35 through 40, Jesus says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Here, welcoming the stranger is literally serving Jesus Christ. No background checks required. Further, Jesus teaches about radical generosity. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 40 to 41, he says, "And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. This isn't just about meeting basic needs, it's about going above and beyond and for other people, including strangers, without any hesitation." Even in New Testaments, obey authorities verses like Romans 13 aren't a blank check for injustice. Theologians argue that when laws conflict with God's higher commands, like loving your neighbor, we follow God first, as Peter did in Acts chapter 5, verses 29, where he says, "We must obey God rather than human beings." Anti-immigrant policies that separate families or deny asylum, that's not biblical law enforcement, that's oppression. So why does MAGA rhetoric feel so off? It's a classic case of cherry picking. They highlight verses about borders, like Nehemiah building Jerusalem's walls to justify modern walls. But Nehemiah was about rebuilding after exile, not excluding migrants. And even then, it included protections for the poor. Or they twist nations in Acts chapter 17, verse 26. He made all the nations and marked out their appointed times and boundaries into anti-immigration ammo. But that's about God's sovereignty, not ICE raids. Meanwhile, they ignore the Bible's radical hospitality, like Ruth, the Moabite immigrant, becoming David's ancestor, or Jesus fleeing to Egypt as a refuge seeker in Matthew chapter 2. Theological critiques abound. Christian nationalism fosters anti-immigrant views by blending faith with nationalism, seeing outsiders as threats to our culture. But this fuels racial injustice, contradicting Christianity's call to resist dehumanization. Even white evangelical leaders admit ambivalence, but polls show secular Trump voters are more anti-immigrant than religious ones, suggesting it's politics, not piety, driving the bus. Now let's talk about Judeo-Christian. It's a myth in this context. Jewish tradition emphasizes tikkun olam, repairing the world, including immigrant justice, yet MAGA often sidelines that, using the term to mask exclusion. As a Reddit thread puts it, why do so many Christians push anti-immigrant vibes when God repeatedly supports them? It's incompatible with true faith. Thankfully, not all faith voices buy in. Many pastors and groups, even some evangelicals, lead the charge for migrant rights, organizing aid and advocacy. They remind us true Judeo-Christian values mean compassion, love, and brotherhood, not cruelty. Including MAGA's anti-undocumented rhetoric isn't biblical. It's a distortion that ignores God's heart for the vulnerable. As believers or truth seekers, we must reclaim scripture from politics. What do you think about this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Is this biblical, or am I missing something? If this resonated, subscribe and share. Thank you for watching. Let's try to build a more compassionate world. God bless you.